Let's first talk about the difference between an approval from a parent and the acceptance by the parent. Whenever we are in an absolute acceptance for who we really are, unconditionally, that is when the actual growth or the relationship between the parent and the child starts to mature. The relationship starts to become blissful as both of them stop owning each other and in return starting to accept their own personal growth through the other person. The child, of course, is growing through the parent, but when the parent starts to accept the child as is, without the conditions, without the judgment, when the parent learns that I do not own the child and that the child is its own free spirit, it has its own soul destiny, its own soul path, then the parent stops assuming the responsibility of the creator for the child, then I must control the growth of my child. It starts to rather align itself for the growth of the child. It starts to release its own fears that are coming out of its own belief system, whether from the current karmic patterns or the karmic patterns coming up from the past lifetimes. These are also impacted by the society that we live in. What is right, what is acceptable, what is a good child, what is a bad child, all those conditioning that the society, the media gives us, the religion gives us, they're also starting to weigh off. Because then the parent, especially the mother, starts to accept the child as is and understand that he or she is acting purely as a medium to support the growth of the child and does not own the growth of the child. There is always a difference in this. When we are supporting the growth of the other person, we are becoming of service to the other soul. But when we are owning the growth of the other person, we assume that the failure or the success of the child, as the child grows and becomes an adult, is the responsibility of the parent. It starts to take the failure of the child as its own failure, and it starts to take the success of the child as a pride of the hard work done by the parent. That is where the owning, the possessiveness, the possession of the child comes. We need to understand that children are not a commodity, they are individual beings. Many of them are coming from higher vibrations and perhaps are more mature. They have taken birth in this incarnation only so that they can teach their parents what is it to remain liberal, to free themselves from karmic packages and patterns and societal conditioning and so on and so forth. But because the parent has given birth to a child, they are sometimes assuming that they need to control the growth of the child. Approval comes with this because when the child is not accepting what the parent is asking for, the parent feels rejected. The parent feels inadequate. The parent feels that I have not done something right for my child because of which my child is behaving the way he or she is. But if the child is accepting what the parents are saying, doing what the parent is asking for, then there's a positive conditioning there. So you see how approval becomes conditional. And here is what the difference between acceptance of the child as is versus the approval from the parent. Approval will always be conditional. If the child is fueling the ego of the parental state in a positive manner, it makes the parent grandiose their own sacrifices that they have done for the child. All of that gives a response as a positive approval. The moment the child says that I am now an independent being, the moment the child crosses the age of 7, 8 and starts to exercise its own independent ego state, starts to build its own independent identity separate from the parent, in that case, the parents become more vulnerable. They feel as if they're losing control on the child, and especially the child when the child moves into the age of 13 plus, when they have an independent existence. That is where the parent feels that I am not able to do justice of being a parent. And sometimes parents also get into depression because they can no longer control the child. So approval comes with the control mechanism. Acceptance comes as is. This is the difference between the approval from a parent versus the acceptance from a parent towards a child as is. Let's